Welcome to NPAC's learning webinar focusing on DonorCentral 101. A couple of housekeeping notes. We are recording this and you will be able to find a link to this in our knowledge base. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter it in the Q&A section on your Zoom screen. So today, Robin will be covering an introduction to DonorCentral, as well as how to provide access for both staff and DonorCentral portal users. She'll talk about the overview of how DonorCentral works from the donor advisor and nonprofit perspective. And then we'll hear from Jeremy Orozco regarding some DonorCentral Q&A as well. Our presenters today as well, I'm Amy Strom, the Director of Client Success. And today you'll be hearing from Robin as she demonstrates DonorCentral, and Jeremy with system updates around DonorCentral. And we do have both Kevin and Leanne available for questions in the background. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Robin to take it away.
All right, thank you, Amy. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, so welcome. I'm going to start on the FIM side because I think it's important to see how you give donors access to DonorCentral and staff access to DonorCentral and what you have for permission options. So just as kind of a big picture, DonorCentral enables donors, fund advisors to submit grant recommendations. They can see their grant histories, they can view their fund balances, they can download or email fund statements, and DonorCentral can also be used for agency endowments so that the agency endowments can request money. They can see their gift history. They can see their fund balances or have access to their fund statements as well. So it's not just for donors and fund advisors. You can use it for agency endowment users as well. All right, I'm going to go to the profile module. So in order to give portal users access to DonorCentral, you're going to do this on the Fund Association tab. The Fund Association tab is both in the profile module or in the fund module, depending on how you're thinking about it. In this case, this profile here is Mr. and Mrs. Donor Advisor. I know, not very creative, but anyway. And if you look here under fund associations, you can actually have them associated to the same fund in more than one way. For example, this particular profile has access to the Clinton Arts Fund because they're an advisor and they can make recommendations, and they also receive a statement. So when statements are generated, that's used for statements, but they have access to all of these funds. And then in the last two columns, if you look on the very first line, the John Adams Fund, this profile is an advisor administrator. So essentially, the advisor administrator has full access to DonorCentral and they can make recommendations. You do have a couple other options here. So if I click the drop down, so none means they have no access to DonorCentral and they cannot suggest grants. So basically they have no grant recommendation privileges at all. 0 means they don't have access to DonorCentral, but they can still suggest grants. This might be a good option for older donors that are really not technology savvy. They'd rather call you on the phone and tell you what they're recommending. So that would be 0. Advisor administrator, like I say, has full access to all of the features in DonorCentral and they can recommend grants. An advisor reviewer can actually log into DonorCentral and see everything. They do not have the ability to make grant recommendations. And then the advisor limited permission, they can log into DonorCentral, they can't recommend grants, and they cannot see grant history. So those are the options that you have from a donor's perspective. Now, the other person or folks that you're going to want to give access to will be staff people, because you're going to want to make changes to DonorCentral or update or have them recommend grants on behalf of donors. And that is done through profile code maintenance in the staff code table. So in the staff code table, if you look across at the bottom, it says there's just one column here for DonorCentral admin type. So they are either a system admin where they have full access to the site and can make changes, recommend grants, whatever needs to be done. And then reviewer is the other permission, and that means they have access to all site admin functions, but they cannot recommend grants on behalf of the portal user. So these are the two ways that you can give those two different types of people access to DonorCentral. So let me minimize my FIMS and we will go to DonorCentral. So here's my DonorCentral login page. And when you give your donors access, once that data syncs with DonorCentral, a welcome email is going to be generated, which you have the ability to customize some of that text that shows up in the welcome email. There's some text that tells them how to get connected, but then you can put customized text as well, welcoming them. And I'm going to log in with a Google email address. Okay, so when the donors log in, the first thing that they're going to see is the homepage. That's where that brings them. There are 4 different tiles that you can make visible on the DonorCentral homepage. The first one at the very top is the welcome tile. This is totally customizable with whatever text. You can put a link to your logo or a picture, but all of the text that's here is user definable. I've chosen to put some information here that has to do with how to recommend a grant or fund information or grant opportunities. I've even put a little note that says grant recommendations are due each Friday. Sorry about that, due each Friday, and then the checks will go out the following Friday. So whatever type of text you think is going to be helpful for your donors and advisors to see can go into this particular tile. If I scroll down, I have 2 more tiles here that are visible. The first one is view your fund details. And as you can see, the names of the funds, recommend a grant, there's links to see more fund details or the latest statement. And I've also chosen to display the available to spend balance from the FIMS database. So these are all of the funds that this particular donor is linked to. And that's a tile that's visible. The other one here is see your grant history. And if you look in this little drop down, there's 2 different things that they can see. They can choose pending. So right now I can see my pending recommendations that they've been brought into FIMS, but the approval is in process. It hasn't been processed yet. And then you've also got approved. So I can also see my approved grants. So here, the very first one was received today. It was approved and it has not been paid yet because the payment is in progress. If I scroll down a little bit, I can see that Pope Memorial had $3,000. It was received and it was paid in January. So you can actually see the dates, or you can click on view all grants. If I click on view all grants, that's actually going to take me to the grants tab, which I'm going to get to in just a little bit. And then the last tile on my homepage is explore opportunities. So in the explore opportunities, you can highlight charities that you are promoting, in this case, Pope Memorial SPCA. has a picture, has information, their vision statement, and I've also enabled the ability to recommend a grant. So if the donor or fund advisor can recommend grants, they could actually recommend a grant from this particular tile. Now, you don't have to put in a recommend a grant link there. That is optional. You can have more than one, as you can see, like this one, Annual Golf for Kids Charity Classic. That's not an organization that I'm highlighting. It's basically just telling them about an event that we have coming up, and there may even be a website that you want them to see for more information. So these are the 4 tiles. Now you can choose to not show grant history, fund details, or opportunities. You can pick and choose which ones you want visible for them. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk about grant recommendations. So there's multiple ways for donors to make grant recommendations. So one of them you can see is from the View Your Fund Details tab. So if I wanted to recommend a grant from any of these funds, I could just click on the Recommend a Grant button. I also can recommend a grant by going to the Recommendations tab at the top. And I have set up my system so that they can submit recurring recommendations. That's an option. And a recurring recommendation, maybe I want $200 a month to go to Pope Memorial SPCA. I can set up the recommendation for $200 a month to be sent to Pope Memorial. What happens is DonorCentral is going to kick off an automatic recommendation on behalf of the donor each month for $200, which you will then bring into your FIM system and approve and pay. You can also set up multi-payment grant recommendations. That's an option. So maybe I want to set up a $1,000 grant with 5 payments of $200 a piece and submit that as well. So there's three different options. It could be just a one-time grant recommendation. It can be recurring, or it can have multi-payments. So there's 3 different ways. And like I say, they can recommend a grant from the View Your Fund Details, or they can recommend from the Recommendations tab at the top, or they can recommend a grant from any one of your opportunities that are in your Explore Opportunities page. So I'm going to go to my donor advised fund that I have access to here, and I'm going to click on Recommend a Grant. And the first thing that it's looking for is the recipient of the grant. So maybe there have been prior recipients that you've recommended to before. So you'll see a list here. And then you also have the ability to just search for a recipient. So maybe I typed in Pope and here's my Pope Memorial. If you can't find the organization that you're looking for, you can click the box for add a new charity, and the donor or fund advisor can enter the information. So required fields would be name, address, city, state, zip. Those are required fields for the recommendation for creating the new charity. I'm going to just choose one from my list here. Okay. And then let me just move my bar out of the way. All right, then I'm going to click on the next button and it's going to take me to the next page. So the next page wants to know what the funding source is. And because I clicked the Recommend a Grant button from the Donor Advised Fund, that's what it automatically populated in here for me. But I could click the drop down if I change my mind about which fund I wanted to pay that. I could choose another one from any of the other ones that I have the ability to recommend a grant for. If I want this fund to be anonymous, I can check the box for anonymous. And then this is a user-defined section that I added to my grant recommendation form, just guidelines for grant recommendations. Certainly you can put in whatever text that you might like. Now the amount field, as you can see, has a little asterisk, so that is a required field. So I'm going to make a $500 recommendation. And here's where I could choose multiple payments if that was the case, what I was doing. You can also choose for the advisor to be anonymous, and you just check that box. Now, these fields below here, some of them are fields that I've added based on customer requests for being able to add additional information. So one of these says, are you submitting the recommendation on behalf of someone else? So if I say yes here, what happens is it automatically displays a field, and then I can put in the name. So let's say I'm a staff person. This essentially was done for staff people. So the donor says to their admin, hey, can you put in the recommendation for me? So what they would do is they would go in and they're logging in as the donor who has the permissions, and then they're just putting in the recommender's name. So you know that that recommendation didn't actually, that the donor didn't sit down and submit that themselves, the admin did that. So that's just an option. You've got program name, grant purpose, special request, donor recognition. This is just something, if the donor wants to be acknowledged in a thank you letter from the grantee, how do they want to be acknowledged? This is also a field that I've added. And then the other thing at the bottom here is this a recurring? So if it's not a recurring, they can go ahead and click on next. And then the very last piece of this is the agreement piece, what they're agreeing to the IRS regulations, then they're not recommending a grant to somebody that they shouldn't be. And they need to click on the I agree button. Now, this says review. So what this is going to do is it's going to review all of the information that they've already put into the recommendation form. And from there, they can actually submit the recommendation, or they can save it for later. If they save this for later, which I'm going to do, your recommendation will be saved but not submitted. And there's going to be a new tile on my homepage called unsubmitted recommendations. So let me just save this. And save. Let me close that. So this should actually show up in a saved recommendations. I might be. Hold on. Okay. Let me go back to recommendations here. And let me just put this back in quickly. So I'll review my recommendation, and then I'm going to click on submit. So what's going to happen, you'll get a little message that the grant recommendation was created in a submission confirmation. And it will also send them an email stating that they have submitted a recommendation. And if somebody in your organization has it set up to be notified CC when the donors make their recommendations, they'll get an email letting them know that the recommendation has been made and that you should be importing that into FIMS. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is your fund details. So there's two ways to get there. One of them is see more fund details, or you can click on the funds tab at the top of the page. So I'm going to click on see more funds detail. And right now it's displaying the Clinton Arts Fund. But if I want to choose a different fund, if I click the drop down under select funds, I can choose to see a different fund. So I want to see the Christmas Endowed Fund. On the right-hand side of the screen, donors can see a market value and they can see spendable balance. You don't have to show spendable balance or market value. But if you notice, you have the ability to give them, put in a note, an information bubble, and it's basically just saying that the total above represents the entire fund balance. This may not include previous month's investment returns and fees, which are typically recorded around the 15th of the following month. So that's just kind of a heads up to them that you're really only reconciling investments once a month and applying, allocating the earnings. And then the spendable balance here as well, which is pulling from FIMS, and it is on in the fund module. It's on the balance tab. It's actually looking at that ATS feature, that user definable feature that you can tell FIMS how the ATS is calculated. That's what it's looking at. And my little note here says takes into account all submitted recommendations, possibly including those yet to be approved, because that's something that you define when you set up your ATS code in FIMS, but not saved recommendations. So it doesn't include anything that they have not submitted that might be sort of sitting in their shopping cart in DonorCentral. But at least it gives them some information of what's available and how these numbers are being calculated. Now, down below in the fund details section, so there are different buckets that actually can be used. And right now, the only information that I have on this particular fund is contributions. So there are no grants that have been made from this fund yet. And I've also got a little information bubble here as well. It says gifts also include pledge amounts. So you can include, for the benefit of your donors, you can either include pledge payments or when pledges are made, depending on what you want them to see. And then if I click on that dollar amount and scroll down, I can actually see the details of what made up those particular, that total $53,500. Donors can export this detailed information. So there's a little export button. They can export that to a spreadsheet if they choose. They can also change the columns. So they can choose which columns of information that they want to see. And they can print this whole page. So if they want to print this whole page, they click on print page, it brings up a print screen that looks exactly like it does on your computer, and they can print that. Okay, so I'm going to switch funds. All right. And next to the fund details tab, and actually on fund details, they can choose a date range. So in the drop down, they can see for all time that the fund has been established. They have this month, this quarter, this year, last year, or they can specify an actual date range that they want to see. But the next tab that we have here is market value. So this is showing market value. My year range is all. It's showing all of the quarterly values since this fund was established back in 2020. And over on the right-hand side, you can see a chart of the growth of this particular fund. And if I scroll down, I have asset allocations telling me how much money is in the checking account, how much money is in pledges receivable, and it's giving me a percentage. And then over on the right-hand side, there is actually a chart that's displaying that for me. So you don't have to show any of this information if you don't want to. You just choose not to export the data from FIMS, and it's not available for the donors to see. And then the last little tab that I have here is activity. and fund activity. So the beginning fund balance of this fund was $0. It's received $200,000 in gifts. Grants voted is $500. There's pledge income of $100,000 for an ending balance of $299,500. So this is also something that you can choose. It's almost like I think of it almost like a little mini fund statement on the fly, but that's also something that you can display for the donors. Now up here next to select funds, I have view statement. So what view statement is going to do is it's going to download a copy of my statement. So let me change to one of my funds that I know has a fund statement. Okay, so my Christmas Endowed Fund has a statement, and when I click on View Statement, here's my option. It's the only one that I have, and I'm going to click on View, and it downloaded the fund statement for me, so I can click on my fund statement and actually see what that looks like. You can have more than one statement out there, you probably do, and they can pick and choose which one they actually want to see. They also have the ability to email themselves a statement. So if they click on the email, the very first sentence says your statement will be sent as an attachment to, and this is the email address that I use to log in here. They can't tell DonorCentral to send this fund statement to anybody. It's just automatically only going to the person that's logged in for security purposes. So this will send an email with the attached statement. All right, so that is the funds tab. And let's take a look at, there's two additional tabs. One of them is grants and one of them is gifts. So I'm going to go to grants. All right, so what you can see here is at the top left, I have pending review. I can see kind of where in the process these are. It tells me when it was received, basically when it was imported into FIMS. And then if I keep scrolling down, I can also see approved grant recommendations. So this first one here was received and approved today, but it has not been paid yet. So I can see payment in progress. Now, there is some really nice filtering capabilities here on this page. If they click on filter, they can filter by fund. They can filter by grantee if they're looking for a specific grantee, or they can filter by dates. So let me choose to select a grantee. Click on my magnifying glass. Here's my Pope Memorial. I will select that and I will apply my filter. The really nice thing about this filter is that it displays up here. So if you're looking at this, maybe you've scrolled down and you're like, why is, such and such missing? If you scroll back up, you'll be like, oh, right, I filtered by grantee. So I'm not going to see anybody else. So that is, then you can also see grant totals by year. There's a little chart on the right, and you can see grant totals by recipient. So these are the 10 highest granted to organizations. And if you hover over this, it's going to give you the total dollar amount. And here also, if you hover over the bars in this chart, it actually gives you the specific dollar amount for each of these years. So nothing is included in here in the grant totals by year except for approved grants. So any of the pending stuff is not visible. Now, the recommendations tab has two options. The one I talked about earlier was new, but if they have recurring recommendations that they want to manage, they can just click on manage recurring. That takes them into and will show them whatever they might have out there. So they can stop it, they can make changes to it, but they can manage their own recurring recommendations, which is nice. You don't have to manage that in FIMS. The next tab that we have is the gift tab. So this is showing gifts made to any of the funds that I'm connected to. This is just telling me that these have all been processed. The reference number is the actual gift number in FIM. So if a donor has a question about any of these, that's a nice reference number that they can give. And they can do a quick glance, which is going to bring out a flyout on the right-hand side. And they can also go on view details and see the details of the gift. All right, bear with me just a minute here. All right, the last two tabs I have here are resources and contact us. You have the ability of either sharing those for donors to see or not. So just an example of what I have under resources is the DonorCentral Quick Start Guide. Anything you put out here under resources is not specific to any funds and everybody can see it. So something to keep in mind. And then the other tab is contact us. So you can put contact information if they have questions, if there's different people that they need to contact regarding different issues, you can have different contact cards out here. So the contact us is available. And then we are back to our home page, and I think that's probably a good place to call it a day.
Great, I have a
Amy?
question for you, Robin.
Sure.
Um, there was a question asked that they liked some of those questions you had in the grant recommendation form. So how can they add those?
So if they put in a request through the support portal, we'll be happy to share that with them.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
You're
I'm going
welcome.
to take back the screen now. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Orozco, our Director of Special Initiatives, who's going to talk a little bit about Donor Central. Take it away, Jeremy.
Right. I'm on unmuted. We're ready to go. I appreciate everyone joining us here today. So as you know, we've been working diligently to try and get Donor Central migrated into our new environment. This has been a long, arduous process, and our development team has been working diligently to unwind the various parts of the product that are very deeply tied with Blackbaud and their architecture. At this point in time, we're still being hosted inside of Blackbaud services, and we intend to have that finalized in the first quarter of 2024. We began working on this back in February, and we have 3 teams that are working to make sure that we are maintaining the product and its functionality, listening to any sort of input that comes in from you all. To make sure that the product is operating as expected. Meanwhile, making as few changes as possible. Our primary goal is to make sure that we're maintaining some sort of sameness as we move the product from, from Blackbaud into Impact Azure. We have not made any major system movements as of yet. Starting in November, we will begin doing local testing to make sure that everything we have is up to snuff. After that point, we'll start doing small migrations of critical resources to make sure that we can ease the migration and have our fallbacks just in case we need it. But most of all, we want to make sure that we maintain uptime and maintain product usability during this entire process. Once we roll out the product in Q1, do our final migration cutover in Q1 of 2024, which is quickly approaching, we will then start looking to expand the product, DonorCentral, and we would love to hear any sort of input from everyone here about any sort of features they're looking for that would help make this a better product for you. We do have a platform called User Voice, and I'm sure we could, if you don't have that link already, we'll make sure we get it out to you, where we listen out for our clients, for customers, to find out what is important to you. Be active, be involved, and vote for the things that might be the best that you think amongst all the ideas that are there, and we're listening. And we'll get that onto the roadmap as quickly as possible. And with that, I think we can open into questions.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. There are no questions. Let me quick see. Oh, we have put the user voice link in the chat for everyone so that you have that easily available. Any questions? Feel free to enter them in the Q&A section and we'll read them aloud. Sure. Leanne, you wanted to bring something up?
Amy, thank you. Hi, everybody. I saw a couple questions regarding DonorCentral working with FIMS on premises. So I just wanted to answer that question for everybody. I answered it individually for a couple customers. So yes, if you have FIMS on premises and you are interested in using DonorCentral, DonorCentral absolutely does work with FIMS on premises. So if you're interested in that, please let Amy know. But yes, it does work with on-premise environments or Azure as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you, Amy.
My contact information is right there on your screen. Please feel free to reach out. If there's no other questions, I think we can end our Let's Talk Solutions here. As always, if you have ideas you'd like to see on Let's Talk Solutions, shoot me an email. We'd love to add additional topics to our list. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Robin. Have a great day, all.